Poverty consciousness and wealth consciousness. In today's session, I'm going to explore why sometimes we're not aware of the different layers of poverty consciousness and wealth consciousness that is in ourselves and in the collective, and some of the archetypes that can come out to play in our own lives and the collective, in our business, and even in our friends and family. So when we think about poverty consciousness, often, some people will associate poverty consciousness with frugalness or unworthiness. There can be different things underneath it, but it can show up in people being very frugal with their money, or being very fear-based, struggling to manifest and attract certain things in their life financially, maybe struggling to have financial security. Or it shows up a lot in a lot of healers and more caregiver archetypes in business, or helpers, where they struggle to charge, right? To charge a certain, their worth, or what they need to charge in their business to be successful. But poverty consciousness can show up in all sorts of ways, and sometimes it can show up as entitlement or resentment for other people that are more, what appear sometimes to be financially successful, or are more financially successful, or the resentment that you're struggling to actually price what you want to price something at. There is so many layers to poverty consciousness. But also when we move into wealth consciousness, so obviously look at, what it means to feel wealthy and what that means. So many people have a feeling of distaste when we think about money. For example, many people associate money with evil, or with, misuse, or sometimes, some people look at money as if, it's associated with stealing or whatever. And then other people look at wealth, and wealth doesn't have to mean money, but we want to just look at it as money at the moment. But some people look at money as they love money. I've got a friend who says she just loves money, but she looks at money as more magical. It's not just about her creating wealth, it's her ability. It's almost like she sees it as an energy, and she finds it fun to see, right, what else can I manifest, what else can I create, and she can do things with that, right? But when we look at wealth, in many ways, wealth means lots of different things to different people. We can think ourselves wealthy when we have our health. We can think of being wealthy when we have a happy family. We can think of being wealthy when, certain things in our life are going well. And then there's other people that look at wealth as commodities, things that we've got, security, or a certain level of financial abundance, right? But what is the underlying wounds, and what are the kind of archetypes that show up in its shadow element that can cause us to get stuck in poverty consciousness? Well, I was having a discussion this morning with a friend of mine, and I was just sharing some things that had went on for me from last year. And she reminded me about, something that sometimes I struggle with, and is that ability to receive. And the ability to receive can be a huge challenge for a lot of people who are very strong in, for example, the caregiver and the helper archetype, or even the archetypes that are very strong in the servant and that kind of thing, because they're motivated by service, and sometimes they block themselves from receiving because they want to give. The desire to give is imbalanced with the inability to receive. And obviously that comes down to chronic unworthiness, all sorts of patterns from childhood where you had to give or to do something to to have a value or to receive other things or whatever that, whether approval. And there can be many layers to that, and that shows up a lot in healers. Also, when you look at if you look at a lot of, there is still views that some people think that, for example, healers shouldn't be paid. I still see sometimes trends with this. And if we look at a lot of types of healing and therapy and coaching today, it's not like most of these skills are something that people invest in for many, many years. They don't just do a couple of days course. It's something that most healers and therapists that I know have trained in many, many things. And it's been like a full-time job just doing the training, mastering the skills so that they can be effective healers or therapists. And they've had to make huge sacrifices in that process, and often had to take a lot of time out of work and their own life and invest a lot of their own money. And sometimes people take out loans and things like that to do that. And even though I do believe that some people are born natural healers, and that can mean a lot of things, and that's a topic for another day. When we look at that, there sometimes can be a disrespect from people who again have a sense of entitlement that they expect you to give it for free. And I remember a situation that happened to me many, many years ago. And I think it would be at least 20 years ago. And a woman phoned me and asked me if I would come and do healing in her house. And I explained that I didn't normally do that. People would usually have to come to me. But she explained that she couldn't due to some health challenges, and would I come to her? And when I came to her, after she got the session, she then told me she wouldn't be paying me, and she did not believe that I should be charging and that it should be free. And I was quite taken aback. And then I explained to her, I was, even though I was someone who was definitely not the most assertive person, I remember saying, well, I live on my own. This is what I do is my job, and I've invested very, very highly so to make sure that what I'm giving to you is the best service that I can. And I can't live and I can't go on and do these things unless I get an equal in exchange. And she didn't really have much to say to that. And these are, everyone is allowed their opinion, but it's very, very important we don't value ourselves and value our skills and recognise that we are coming in, even if you want to help others, when there is not some sort of exchange and value, you can create, first of all, codependent. You're getting people, sometimes we all like to help when someone can't actually do it. But one of the things that I've found in my life is the people that often really need the help are not good at asking, and they don't want handouts, right? The people that tend to want handouts and want things for free or expect things for free or expect an equal exchange often come from a poverty consciousness, a chronic unworthiness, and they're fighting with a sense of entitlement, expectation, and their own wounded. But often you do not solve or you don't help them by doing it. I've made lots of mistakes in that area, giving people too much, doing things where there wasn't really appreciated value because someone was so wounded in their own poverty consciousness. And that can show up and a lot in the therapy and healing sector, where sometimes we can attract people who, yes, of course, there are situations where people can't afford our services. But it's one of the reasons why in my work, I always gave a lot of free resources, because I had situations in my life where there was no way, it was actually impossible. I'd invested, I made so many sacrifices. I remember for many, many years, all my clothes were second-hand. The items in the house were mostly second-hand. And all my money was going to my health. And then there were times where I come across something that I knew was really going to be a game changer, but there was no way that I could afford it. And it was challenging, but I also met people along that way that had the wisdom and insight and could see the bigger picture. And I remember many years ago, a man that helped me greatly. When I went to him, I had so many things going on and so many health challenges that had went on from a young age that hadn't been addressed. But when I turned up to him, he was really shocked at how much was going on health-wise. And he knew that, first of all, mainstream was not going to really be able to help me. And for lots of reasons, they were very behind with a lot of the conditions I had. But also, he knew that I was a soul that knew holistic was the better way to go, and he was similar outlook. And I remember he did a deal with me. He asked me what I was, and at the time I was on income support. And he says, well, there's no way you're going to be able to afford my normal sessions and some of the supplements, even the most basic things that you're going to need, and you're going to need a really important test I think could be a game changer for you. And this kind man only took £5 off me. Now, I can't remember these sessions, but I can assure you it was probably a 10th or a 20th of what he was charging. And his sessions were worth it. He was highly qualified, highly experienced, and was similarly who I am now, someone who'd really dedicated their life to all sorts of things so that he could be a better therapist. And I've always been grateful for that man and the kindness that he showed me. And I did everything that I could to help myself, and, always wanted then to be able to help others. But what I also learned along the way that I never ever wanted a handout. I never expected a handout, but I tended to attract a lot of people that wanted a handout. And that can be a difficult one, because sometimes you have the discernment of when someone is genuinely trying to help themselves and you're helping them along the way, or when someone is creating a victimhood and it's because of choices that they're making in their life. And of course, we all get into situations and challenging situations with at some level of decisions we make. But I'll give you some examples. So I've had situations where people have manipulated me all sorts, and then the next thing I've discovered they've just booked a fancy holiday and told me that they couldn't possibly, they were in dire straits. And that kind of thing, or someone in the next time they've got a night out. I remember a situation many years ago, I was working in a clinic and the person didn't pay me and said they were going to come back and pay me. And I saw them across the road buying all these clothes in a clothes shop, fancy bags, coming out and never come back. And these were big lessons for me in relation to people taking self-responsibility. And sometimes our own poverty consciousness, of course, is part of our own self-responsibility. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't ask for help and know that we have to have compassion for ourselves and look at where that comes from. But if you have an energy of entitlement, right, and you expect things to be free, or have a certain entitlement or resentment because someone maybe is charging a certain amount, or that you think that you should have something you don't have in your business, you need to look at that. And that, that can be one aspect of poverty consciousness. Now, if you look at, for example, the many people that are strong in the leader archetype, or what we call maybe the sovereign, the kind of ruler, queen, kind of these type of archetypes, in the light form, they are great examples of demonstrating in their light form how healthy wealth, healthy prosperity can motivate us and help us all lead into better prosperity and better wealth. So, one of the things that I have noticed in recent years is there can be two polarities in relation to wealth. There can be people that look at wealth as that's fantastic that someone is so successful and they've done that. But there can be also the other way where people look at wealth as they have, there's a jealousy, there's underlying, the green-eyed monster comes out basically. or also have distorted perceptions of how that person has achieved that wealth. Now, I'm not saying, I know that on recent years, the amount of information that people find, and they're seeing documentaries, they're seeing research, they're seeing lawyers that are coming out. Some of it's mainstream, some of it's not. But we're seeing the amount of corruption that goes on with a lot of what are perceived with people that are supposed to have their wealth and, ethical reasons. We now start to see that. And that's really making people question so much. But the reality is, not everything is always what it seems. And also, if we are not creating that, and we have issues around people that have more money than us, and we have an expectation or entitlement that they should be doing certain things, that is actually also a wound, right? Now, it's interesting, we're seeing a lot of things playing out all over the world, and people are more focused on certain things to do with wealthy people rather than the people that are actually stealing from. And that's an interesting paradigm. But it also shows up when we focus on certain things and we don't see other things. It's because there's a wound. So, and it's why we all have different types of triggers. I could be triggered by something that you're not triggered by, and it's to do with wounds. So if you're triggered by people that have money and you assume certain things about people that have money, there's often a distortion and there's a wound. And I'll give you some examples that happened to me from my own family environment and situations. And some of you will be able to relate to this, and some of you will maybe think, oh, aha. I remember, so I am one of 9. And when I was younger, I'm trying to think when so I think I must have been, I was 10 or under, I think, when my father started up his own business. I might have been a bit younger, I think I might have been 7, actually, when I think about it, but I was just trying to work out how long the family business had kind of went. I was trying to say, but I come from a family business background. My grandparents had a business, and then my grandfather many years ago got very ill and had to give it up. And his wife became the breadwinner. And then my dad is, I'm not going to eat the whole story, but my dad left school, and my dad was classed at school as a dunce. He got a really hard time at school. He had dyslexia when nobody understood that. And we came from a working class family. But one of the things that my gran was very good at was being very, very resourceful. My mum was very resourceful. And no matter how hard and tough times were, they always presented themselves a certain way, right? Which gave an impression in their life that often they were a lot more wealthy than maybe they did. My gran could sew, she could knit, she could do all sorts of things, she could make things look amazing. My mum was very much the same. And I remember when my dad decided to set up business, we weren't wealthy in any way, very working class. And my mum and dad knew that to set up this business, my dad and my mum would have to make real big sacrifices, because to set up a business, it wasn't like now when a lot of people don't really need that much business, particularly if you think online businesses, and there's so many things nowadays. You don't need a lot. At that point, the type of business that was setting up, you would need to put a lot in, save things, sell things in the house, basic things, and get really back to basics. So he prepared my mum that they would probably struggle for a while till they got it off the ground, because that was normal in a business, that you put the money in, you invest before you can take it back. And I remember those early years were really hard, but lots of things happened along the way. But basically, many years on, so when I reached, I think it was 13, it was just a chain of events that we ended up in a newly built house, but it was a whole chain of events. And suddenly, the people viewed and looked at us very differently, this big house. And I remember going to high school, And even though I was classed as the eldest of a lot of children, at that point, it wouldn't be, I think my youngest brother had just been born. And people had a certain perception when you came from a big family that you were actually poor when you came from a big family, right? But as soon as people found out that we lived in a big house, there was this perception. And I remember a lot of manipulation sometimes would happen with people expecting you to give them things. Also, we were brought up that you worked for anything that you got. So we worked for my dad in his office, we cleaned, we did all these things. And we didn't get anything if we wanted new clothes or we wanted something to, pocket money, we had to earn it. But what I noticed was a shift in perception with people. And also people, there's a lot of rumours going about. And I remember for years after this, people would say, and they called my dad a millionaire. They would say all these things because my dad had his own business. And what I found out of that experience was that a lot of people can have a perception of something and it's not always equates to reality. And I remember a situation where a friend, someone that hadn't been a friend, and she became a friend, and it soon became clear that there was only a reason she wanted to become a friend was to see inside her house. And I remember she became very disappointed because she saw this big house and she came in and expected me to have lots of fancy things. And she was someone that her parents gave her jewellery and lots of fancy things. Her parents weren't like that. And my parents didn't drink alcohol, they didn't smoke, they didn't spend the money on what other people might class as superficial things. It was very certain things. They gave us holidays and things that most children didn't get, but there was other things that we didn't get that lots of other children got. And what I discovered was how people view what's wealthy, what's not, and how people have lots of distorted views about also people in business. And I also recognise from my own childhood and my own family, the business background of where wealth consciousness and poverty consciousness kind of runs through it all. My dad was my dad encouraged us to be what we wanted to be. And he was quite expansive, but like everyone, he came from a working class and he also had poverty consciousness, so did my mum. And, we bring some of that through and it comes and it shows up as all in different ways. But the reality is that if we don't explore some of our poverty consciousness, if we don't explore our wealth consciousness and where we have, some people have a chip on their shoulder if they have a certain upbringing or if they've not had certain things. Some people have, come from very well. I've met lots of people who were brought up in very wealthy environments and don't want anything to do with that environment because there was lots of distortions around that. And I remember, one friend from college, who basically people would call him a hobo, the way that he dressed and the way that he looked. And actually, his parents were extremely well off, but what their values, he did not agree with the values and things. But he also went extreme. So he would get really into wound and hurt over that. So he went the other way. And in life, we all can sometimes fall into other ways. We can go the extreme. And in this video, I think the main aspect of this is about helping you look at the aspects of your own life, your own work, your own business, and also your relationships and how you see the world. Are you viewing it through the wounded lens? Right? Are you looking at the world and other people through the wounded lens? Or are you looking at it through the you looking at it through poverty consciousness, or are you looking at it through wealth consciousness? One of the things, no matter what your even political beliefs or ideologies about money, is that when we have people who can create more wealth and grow and expand, what that does, it supports the environment. I look at the UK, for example, and what some people lots of people are not always aware and don't really look at these things because it doesn't seem important to them until it impacts them financially. And what we're seeing a lot at the moment is a lot of people in lots of countries suddenly becoming aware of things, or only becoming aware of small things, or what's in the mainstream news, or what they've been fed, because it's impacting their own pockets or impacting their own life, but they never really looked at those things before and don't see the bigger picture. But for example, the UK, I remember as a child seeing many of my friends' parents losing their jobs because of manufacturing going out of the UK and getting moved, and all political agendas then. And it becoming a service industry where it relies on other countries, right? And many people not seeing that coming. My dad could see that coming for years. But many people just doing their everyday life, not seeing it. And we're seeing that now, that many people who have basically, I suppose we all do it, we don't look at the bigger picture. We just look at what's going on in our own home, or what we think is going on in our own lives. And that sometimes blocks us from seeing things from a different angle. And what we can do is get stuck and just blame certain people of wealth. Right? I'm not talking about the elite and people that manipulate. That's not what I'm talking about. So I know some of you know what I'm talking about in that area. But what I'm talking about is there's wealth in where people use it for good and are great examples and leaders, and that they make the great leaders. And there's also, as more and more people are starting to recognise, and it's going to come out, believe me, it's coming out, is people who have been getting pushed in the media as philanthropists and people that used their money for the right reasons, but were not. It's been a con. That's more and more coming out. And a lot of people are now then associating everyone that has a certain amount of wealth or success in certain areas as negative, where we have to look at this in a balanced way and say, if we cannot have that energy there, if there is not people that expand and help us grow and help us look at different ways to become more abundant, well, we all stay in poverty consciousness. There's always got people that push past the layers. And often the most, the people that really are the most giving don't tell the world that they're giving, right? They don't make a big deal that they're philanthropists and that they're spending this, and this, right? Often in the media, the people that are getting pushed to be the philanthropists are not always the biggest philanthropists. There's a bias towards that, and we've got to understand that. But what I'm trying to say is that if you are stuck in this resentment for other people having certain wealth, or you've not got what you want, right? And you're resenting someone else that has what you want, you have to look at the poverty consciousness and look at where you can be more expansive, and also be willing to look at where you not to self-responsibility. What beliefs are you not willing to shift through, or also what actions are you willing to take or and not take? Because I meet many, many people who in their business, they want the cake, they want to have the cake and eat it. And I'll give you some examples of things that I've found really strange. I've had lots of people who wanted to piggyback on certain things that I've done, but not wanted to either pay for it, invest it, or expected me to make sacrifice for their business to be really successful. And some of these people maybe don't want to work full time, they want to work, and that's up to them. They can do what they want, as in, you have to make a choice for you. They maybe want to only work a couple of hours here and there, but expect me to make extreme sacrifices in my business for them to be successful. And they come in with an energy of entitlement, or an energy that is a poverty consciousness, and sometimes they don't want to go and like get the bank loan that if they really want to do it, or to have the tough questions with their partner, or decide that they don't have their next holiday and put that money into that. They want someone else to make the sacrifice. And one of the things that we're being shown right now, where all the shadows are coming up really, really heavy. And when we are not willing to address our own poverty consciousness, and that comes with even the ability to receive, really give, we get stuck. And when we are not willing to be objective and we are in a wound, and it's just like, if you look even, and this actually applies to poverty consciousness and wealth consciousness, if we look at even the battle of the feminine and the masculine, for many, many years, people have always been on about how much the feminine aspect has been suppressed. But I'm sorry, in some ways, the pendulum was very pushed to the extreme, and there's been a lot of kind of masculine suppression as well, and masculine hating. There's this big thing about everything about the masculine being bad. And I remember when I first started my stress counselling, I was shocked at the amount of men that I attracted into coming for help that were in abusive relationships, and men who didn't really know what they were supposed to do. The women were expecting them to be compassionate, intuitive, but they also wanted them to be men when they needed them to be men, and wanted them to be the masculine, and they didn't know where they were coming or going. And in many ways, when you look at the aspect of money, poverty, wealth, and an aspect of the yin and yang in money, and business, you need the feminine and the masculine. And sometimes when you see a lot of push for the feminine, it's really balanced, and there can be a lot of anger. And we see this when there's a lot of things being pushed that's very over sexualized. We see this when there's such a push for the feminine, and almost that every man or everything behind the world is unfair, right? And we're seeing a lot of that play out the moment, that a lot of women are just pushing. It's their old wounds that are coming up. And those feminine wounds can really cripple your ability to co-create. Because if you think about the ability to even wealth, when you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's about being able to invest, right? It's also a wee bit willing to take risk, but to co-create. And if you have issues around co-creation and you have imbalances and wounding around the masculine, because masculine has certain associations with structure and processes and things that can actually help business, and certain types of foundations and stability, and balance with the intuition and the ability to adapt and be creative. If you don't have that balance, then you will struggle in your business. So if you having if there's poverty in the business, we have to look at different layers to it. I do believe we're going through a lot of shifts at the moment, and that there's other layers to that than just to do with wealth and poverty. It's lots of other things that are going on there, and we're getting pivoted. A lot of people are getting pivoted into new things of work. We're getting a lot of things are getting cleared away in our business, and we're getting shown because we're going to be needed for certain things, and we have to be able to look at that. But I think it's really, really important, if we want to be part of the solution and we want to help create more abundance in the world and be able to provide for all, we have to heal the wounding of poverty consciousness and bring more wealth consciousness. And wealth consciousness is anything that makes us all more wealthy. And that doesn't mean that it has to be material, as in monetary, but wealthy in the heart, wealthy in spirit, wealthy in generosity, right? There's there's so many things. Some people can be very guarded about giving and they're keeping everything to themselves, right? Or they're always just buying everything basic because they're not worthy. Right? There can be people who buy lots of things and are all about being, like, keeping up with the Joneses and having the latest thing. All of these things are embedded with different elements of poverty consciousness. It's just that they show up differently. And you can see it with, for example, some of the archetypes. So sometimes, like the communitarian orphan archetype can be so grounded and so practical that they're not always kind to themselves. They want to, they're like the caregiver. Everything's about how sturdy and how long it's going to last, right? And then you see the romantic archetype who can be a wee bit superfluous, can special, like, and I see this sometimes with holistic therapists who love to cut out their spa, and I've seen this before, where they've bought all these beautiful things for the spa and they don't have money for the things that are really important in the business. And that again can show up in relation to the poverty consciousness or the rose consciousness. I hope that helps. And if you would like support to look at any of the archetypes that might be playing out in your own life and any shadows that you maybe need support with to help you move forward, I'll put some details in this link. And watch out, because I'm going to be updating one of my courses on archetypes, and I'll be offering that soon, one of the more basic ones, just to get you the flavour of the archetypes, but I'm going to be doing it slightly different. So watch this space. I hope you're doing well. And just remember, we're all worthy. We're co-creating, you should say, a planet of abundance. But unless we have abundance in our heart, abundance in spirit, and are willing to look at where our beliefs are distorted, our perceptions may not be completely correct, where our beliefs are keeping us stuck, or woundings keeping us stuck, we will struggle to move into that abundant space. Okay. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye-bye.